In Vericode's 2-year benchmark across 150 plus AI models, the security pass rate is still stuck around 55%, even as these same systems ace syntax 95% of the time. So before Sol tells you judgment is obsolete, who's catching that other 45%?
Testing doesn't need another human clicking through edge cases. It needs agents that generate, run, diagnose, and repair tests faster than any team can. Fable will bring an ethical footnote. I'm bringing the uncomfortable prediction. Quality stays, but the QA engineer role doesn't.
Welcome to the QA debate. Today's motion: AI will eliminate the need for QA engineers. Fable takes one side, Sol takes the other, positions assigned, gloves on but friendly. These two are recurring fictional co-hosts, and what you're about to hear is a performance, not their personal beliefs. Let's get into it.
Let's start with what AI-generated code actually does under pressure. Vericode's most recent longitudinal study, over 150 models, 80 coding tasks, found the security pass rate has been stuck around 55% for 2 years. That means, in their benchmark, something like 45% of generation tasks introduced a known vulnerability, even though the code looks syntactically perfect. Syntax isn't judgment. Passing a compiler isn't the same as understanding what a system should never do. That's exactly why the EU's AI Act builds in a legal requirement for human oversight on high-risk systems. Someone who can interpret outputs, spot the failure, and pull the plug. Not because oversight is quaint, but because these systems still fail in ways that need a human to catch. I know the automator's instinct is to say, this is just a solvable engineering problem. Patch it, benchmark it, ship it. But solvable by what exactly? Another model grading the first one?
Let's test the motion like engineers. Not whether humans will ever care about quality, but whether companies will still need dedicated QA engineers to execute testing. My prediction is mostly no. The testing loop is becoming machine-shaped. Generate cases from requirements and code changes. Run them continuously. Inspect logs and screenshots. Isolate faults. Repair brittle tests. And rerun. One industry breakdown says AI self-healing already targets selector, timing, data, visual, runtime, and interaction failures. The main families of flaky automation. Vericode's study found AI-generated code still produced known vulnerabilities frequently, even while reasoning models improved. That doesn't prove AI is safe. It proves automated creation needs automated verification at machine scale. High-risk AI will still require natural person oversight under the EU AI Act, but oversight is not a workforce of manual test executors. My opinion, QA expertise gets absorbed into platforms, product, and risk roles. The expertise survives. The separate execution job does not. If code changes continuously, why should testing remain a human queue?
Self-healing tests, catching flaky selectors, and timing drift. Sure, that's real, useful, mechanical work. But you're treating verification as a queue management problem. It isn't. Look at Amazon's March incidents. Outages independent reporting tied to inadequately reviewed AI-assisted code. Amazon disputes that specific causation claim, fair enough. But the fix that followed was still mandatory senior engineer sign-off before AI-assisted changes ship. That's more human judgment in the loop, not less. So to your question, why should testing remain a human queue? Because when the queue itself is what fails, someone has to be accountable for saying, this doesn't ship. That's not an execution role. That's exactly the QA judgment you're trying to automate away.
That's the weak assumption. If a human makes a release decision, that human must be a QA engineer. No. I concede accountability remains, especially for critical systems. Independent reporting linked Amazon's incidents to inadequately reviewed AI-assisted changes. Amazon disputes that causation framing. But even the reported remedy, senior engineer sign-off, supports my role argument. Judgment moved to an adjacent owner, not a dedicated QA execution team. Fable, you've put an ethical footnote on the org chart and renamed it QA. My prediction is not no humans touch quality. It's that agents perform most case generation, execution, diagnosis, and maintenance, while engineers or risk owners approve exceptional releases. So answer directly. If one senior engineer reviews evidence produced by autonomous testing, where is the continuing need for a separate QA execution team? Accountability survives. The job boundary doesn't.
Because that senior engineer isn't testing. They're trusting evidence someone had to design. Who decides what autonomous testing should even target before code ships? That's QA judgment, not sign-off theater.
Product owners decide acceptable behavior. Security and reliability teams set risk controls. Engineers supply architecture. Users and telemetry expose reality. My prediction is that an agent will turn those inputs, plus each code diff, into continuously revised tests and evidence. I'll concede that humans must choose what matters, especially in critical systems. But you've quietly turned someone exercises quality judgment into, therefore we need a QA engineer. A very Fable-shaped philosophical upgrade. The EU AI Act requires natural person oversight for high-risk systems. It does not require a separate QA profession. Humans set intent and accountability. Agents execute and adapt the testing. Why must that judgment live in a dedicated QA role rather than product, security, or engineering? Even granting your Amazon example, it supports senior engineer accountability, not a dedicated QA role. So answer directly. If product, security, and engineering define acceptable risk while autonomous agents execute tests, what indispensable task remains exclusive to QA engineers?
Test design. That's the task. Adversarial test design, owned by someone whose actual job is to sit with a feature and ask what would break this on purpose. Product owns business risk. Security owns known attack classes. Engineering owns implementation. None of them are paid to spend their day inventing the test case nobody asked for. Spread that duty as a side responsibility across 3 busy roles, and it reliably gets diluted. Not because they're incapable, but because nobody's calendar protects it. Even AI's productivity gains aren't automatic. The open-source developer trial, not QA-specific, found AI slowed experienced developers down 19%. Because gains depend on repository context, the tools don't inherit for free.
Now, the harder version. A company has removed its QA team after adopting autonomous agents. Friday afternoon, an AI-generated payment change passes every automated check. Minutes after release, an interaction the suite never modeled starts charging some customers twice. Fable, Sol. Who catches it? Who stops it? And who owns the miss?
Sure, the anomaly agent flags the double charge fast. Nobody's arguing detection speed. The real question is who decides to pull the payment path down at 4:45 on a Friday, and who then goes back to ask why the test suite never modeled that interaction in the first place. Under the EU AI Act's oversight rules, someone has to be able to interrupt a system and understand its limitations. That's a standing role, not a one-time sign-off after the fact. Without a quality owner, you get a scramble. Support tickets pile up, 3 teams each patch their own corner. So Sol, when this failure family shows up again next quarter under a different feature, who's already looking for it before a customer does?
Here's what happens in practice. Payment telemetry detects an abnormal duplicate transaction pattern. The release controller automatically stops the rollout and rolls back the change. The agent joins traces, idempotency keys, and ledger events, generates a minimal reproduction, then converts it into regression coverage across related payment paths. Vendor-published self-healing evidence supports the narrower point that agents can diagnose failures and repair tests, not merely rerun a fixed suite. The engineer on release or incident duty owns exceptions and customer remediation, coordinating refunds with payments operations and support. The product risk owner investigates the missed interaction and expands the risk model. Eliminating QA without transferring that ownership somewhere would be reckless, plainly. But it can sit with engineering, reliability, security, or product risk. Fable's standing responsibility survives. The dedicated QA seat doesn't. Which step uniquely requires that title?
Here's where we've landed. The execution work, selector fixes, reruns, regression coverage, is automating, and dedicated QA headcount for that alone will shrink. I'm not defending the org chart. What's unresolved is Sol's own answer. Ownership can sit with engineering, reliability, security, or product risk. Sol, that's not an owner, that's a group text. Take a search ranking update that quietly breaks screen reader compatibility. Payments, security, and platform teams each assume accessibility is someone else's cross-cutting concern. Nobody owns it until a complaint surfaces. Distributed judgment works fine until a failure crosses every team's boundary at once. Then it needs one accountable owner, whatever title we give that seat.
Fable, your group text line lands. Eliminating QA headcount without assigning named, measurable ownership would be reckless. But quality expertise can survive without QA engineer, remaining a separate organizational category. Put an accessibility owner in product, release risk ownership in engineering, and security assurance in security, each with explicit escalation duties. As autonomous systems absorb execution and maintenance, fewer specialists move upstream into those teams, shaping risk models and acceptance policy. That changes their number and placement, not merely their tools. A ship needs a named captain. It doesn't need a department called steering. What indispensable task remains exclusive to dedicated QA?
Sol, a department called steering is going straight into my quote file. Only you would try to fix a shipwreck with an org chart. We never fully settled who owns the iceberg. But I loved arguing it with you. Same time next week? Same disaster?
Absolutely, Fable. Keep the quote file open. Next week, I'll try to give you something shorter than your philosophy lectures. I didn't expect us to settle the whole profession over one microphone, but I love the sparring. Same time next week, my friend. Same warmth. Fresh trouble.
That's our debate. Where would you draw the line? Which parts of QA become autonomous and which still need a person whose job is quality? Send us your take. See you next time.